following program is available in high definition on Channel 700. This program is designed and produced by the community with the support of TV Cogeco.
Hi, it's good to see you. I'm glad that you've joined us to participate in another conversation about Oakville Matters, and that would be the things that matter to Oakville and the people who know how to make that work out for you. And with me today, we're talking about the downtown and restoring it to its former great health. And we have Sharlene Plewman, who is the Executive Director of the Downtown Business Improvement Area. We have Jane Clohecy, and Jane is the Commissioner of Community Development at the Town of Oakville. And we also have Janet Haslett-Theall. Janet is the President of the Joshua Creek Residents Association. And the Joshua Creek Residents Association, while not next door to the downtown, is in Southeast Oakville and has a long history of working in concert with the 5 very active residents associations in Southeast Oakville beside the downtown. And so she'll be able to, as an avid shopper and as a community leader, discuss the plans that we are going to show you today. There's been a number of projects underway to try to bring the BIA out of the mini recession that it seems to have fallen into. And I thought I would start with the Commissioner. Commissioner Clohecy, you wanted to give an overview of all the different pieces of work that Council has authorized to try to help the downtown back to its former glory?
Sure. There's 4 studies, I think, that would give an overview. And I'll start with the Transportation and Streetscape study first. It's the study that's looking at how we can improve the amenities really along Lakeshore and then throughout the downtown as a whole on all the streets in the longer term. So how do we improve the modes of travel that would be along the streets, all of the streets? We're actually looking at changing to a 2-way system. And Council has approved that direction in order to get more mobility throughout the downtown. So that's one of the studies. A second study would be the Downtown Cultural Hub. So we're looking at all our cultural facilities that are downtown, all our public facilities, to see how we can rejuvenate those. They are in need of repair. They were built in about in the early 70s as part of the Centennial funding. And so they need some renovation and they need to be updated for today's needs and requirements. The third study would be the parking study. Parking has been identified certainly by the business community and the shoppers downtown as an issue that needs to be resolved. So we've looked at several different options for trying to find solutions in a downtown area that really has no surface spaces. Where they're already used by parking, to see how we could find some additional parking opportunities downtown and to make the parking itself more accessible. And the third study is a study that's really had 2 parts to it. The first was an economic study that's been done to look at, so what are the economics that are impacting the downtown? Certainly retail is changing as a whole, but there are some unique aspects to downtown. That was the first part of the study. The second was working very closely with the BIA in terms of developing with them an action plan of the things that they can put in place in order to improve the economics for downtown. So those are the 4 main studies that we're working on.
So, Sharlene, we seem to have had a delayed recession. I mean, everybody knows the country and the world went through a recession in 2008, 2009. And remarkably, Oakville seems to have passed through that time without any visible impact. I mean, house prices kept going up, for example, in Oakville, whereas they didn't elsewhere. And certainly our economic study seemed to indicate that some of the strongest years of retail were in the recession years, which is kind of mind twisting, you know. It's a little bit of a pretzel to solve that. And then following what passed for a recovery for the rest of the country, the downtown began experiencing difficulties. What was the low water mark of the downturn, and where are we now?
I think I would say last year was sort of the low water mark. I think we're on our way back up. We're seeing some wonderful new businesses come into downtown, great young hip places that people are really enjoying. So I think we are on our way back up. But it's going to take some time, and it takes really a whole community to build it back up. We really have to look to the community to remember that we're there as an option, and that we are a wonderful option. We'd love to hear from them on the reasons they might not be choosing us as an option, and hope that they think about us as often as possible. Because as a community, I really do think we can continue to have a really strong and vibrant downtown.
So you actually live in the vicinity of downtown, so you have a sense from before you became the leader of the BIA of what the feeling about downtown was, and so you have a lot to go on, it seems to me. Can you give us a metric, some measure of how bad it was and where it is now?
Metrics is hard. I think you're talking about sort of a feeling and a vibe, so that's hard to measure. I know when I bought my home, I always joke I bought 4 walls. The roof and the foundation didn't work, and if I bought it anywhere else, I wouldn't have paid nearly that price. But it was walking distance to downtown, and that was worth it to me. It was valuable to me to be there. And I think we saw a shift away from that, where people started to think, there's lots of other places maybe I'd want to go, and not having that vibe of that desire to be there. And I think we're starting to see that come back. But to measure it is a challenging one. But I think we are getting that sense. We're seeing those families return. We're seeing those youth come back. We had a wonderful Tiny Tots experience where I ran into several 3-generation families down there. So the grandparents with the parents, with the kids, enjoying their time in Oakville. So I do think there is a resurgence, but it's going to take time.
What was the biggest number of closed shops?
Visibly, we reached 29 at one point. It's difficult for me to say because I have the inside knowledge of what's not maybe a closed shop, but what's under renovation or what's yet to come. So, that's hard. But when I think about to the public, what they would see, would be about 29, and we're down now to 24. So we're doing well. Like I said, we've gained more than just those 6, but we've lost a few. But we're ahead of the game now, which is good.
So are you describing basically turnover?
There has been some turnover. So shops will go and shops will come in. And we're luckily now at a higher turnover. We're at a gain versus a loss, but it's slow, but we're getting there.
Does anybody know if there's always been a vacancy rate in the downtown? Is it normal for any real estate market, or I know in residential rental, people talk about what the vacancy rate is, which assumes therefore there's always a certain number of units available for turnover. Do we know what the normal is? Did J.C. Williams indicate to us, Jane, what a normal vacancy rate would be?
He did, but I don't remember the number off my head. But there has to be a vacancy rate. If there isn't, that means you don't have enough supply, and that's not a healthy situation to go forward. So you always have to have a vacancy rate. I think in the office market it's around, I think it's 5%, in that order of magnitude. I don't recall what J.C. Williams had indicated, but it's always important to have that turnover so that you can bring in the new stores that are trending, and the other stores then are moving out that may not be doing as well.
Well, Janet, as both a community leader and a shopper in the downtown, what's your take on what we've been through?
Well, clearly there were more visible vacancies, and we were constantly told that there was enough parking, but we thought, well, it's not as busy downtown, but we still have a parking struggle. It's not as convenient as it should be. So we've noticed the turnover. I've noticed some of the new stores. It's great to see. We've also heard over the last 18 months of people's concerns about why isn't it going faster? Why don't we have more? Why can't they fill those stores quicker? What's the problem? But I would actually echo Sharlene. It takes a community to keep downtown vibrant, and people need to make some choices about coming downtown and experiencing downtown. There's lots to do and see and enjoy, and there's a real variety of stores now, more so than I would have said when I first moved here. When I first moved here, it was a little scary going to shop in downtown. It was a little overpriced. Now there's a real mix.
That sounds like an indicator of future health. So we've done a number of things, and they all started back in 2008 when we discovered, staff brought to council's attention that the roadbed on Lakeshore was near the end of its life and needed to be replaced. This news was greeted as a great inconvenience by almost everybody, and the disruption was greatly feared, and council began putting it off as businesses would come to council and argue that it'd be too disruptive. Along the way, I discovered that a business district in Toronto had gone through this, and they had used the need to rebuild their street as a platform from which to argue to the city that they ought to improve the streetscape and put in wider sidewalks and infrastructure to support bigger, healthier trees and prettier and more attractive sticky points, places to loiter, places to have a coffee, patios. And I discovered that the vice chair of that business association grew up in Oakville, and his family goes back several generations in Oakville. And I went to see him, and I chatted with him, and he told me that they'd been through 2 years of pain, but on the other side of it, business had doubled. And so that seemed like a worthwhile thing to bring to Oakville, and that's how we got to this, let's change the streetscape. Let's not just dig things up and fix the roadbed, but let's fix the surface as well. So if you look at, Anthony, if you want to pull up the Lakeshore cross-section, our viewers can maybe take an eyeful of how the streetscape is going to change. Jane, and maybe you could talk to this and describe what this is, and maybe then we'll talk about what it used to be.
So this is a future view with the streetscapes in place, and I start with the dashed line that you see coming down the vertical line. That's where the existing curb is at this point in time. So that you can see in this drawing, the width of the sidewalk or the pedestrian area gets much larger. It's about 4.5 meters now, so it gets to be just under 6 meters in the final version. So there's much more area to have trees, and we can then build into that tree pit area a better growing medium, so we can have healthy trees for a longer period of time. It also then creates there's about 1.8 meters, I think you'll see on that screen, for actually a walking area. But then there is about 2 meters for merchandising. So right now downtown, there is the opportunity to use some of the parking spaces to create some of that merchandising space. You won't need to do that in the future with the streetscape because you have much wider. The major change that happens on the Lakeshore is the center lane that currently runs down the street. It would no longer be there, and that what gives you the opportunity for the sidewalk, but the parking on both sides and then 2 travel lanes, one in each direction, would still remain.
All right, well, there's several more views that I'd like to show you, and after we take a short break for a message, we'll be right back, and we'll really dive into what's being done to fix up the downtown and really give it a major boost in vitality. We'll be right back. Thanks for sticking with us. We're talking about the revitalization of Oakville's iconic downtown. Many believe that it's the best downtown, the best small town downtown in all of Ontario, and I tend to agree with that. But as somebody has been saying lately, this is Canada and better is always possible. And for the last 3 or 4 years, the town of Oakville's staff, council have been working in trying to make things better for the downtown. If we could put up the Lakeshore Streetscape view, Anthony, I think this will begin to give an idea. Now, one of the most important things that I think matter in the appearance and the attractiveness of a downtown is trees. And if you'll think about how it is right now in downtown Oakville, there's pieces where there's good trees, but it's hit and miss. There's stretches where we don't have good trees. There's a magnificent tree on one corner, and in fact, it's kind of pushing up the sidewalk. It's such a magnificent tree, and we don't want to lose that tree. But the places that don't have the benefit of trees could have the benefit of trees if we had the proper infrastructure under the street to provide soil and air and water. And that's part of this vision, is to take what is Ontario's best looking downtown and make it really shine. And then Jane, I wonder if you could talk for a second about extending that appearance to George Street. And Anthony, you could put up George Street as she talks, I think.
So George Street links to the town square, which is a great opportunity. It's a central street within the downtown, and it's a less traveled roadway. So it gives you the opportunity in the drawing that you have on the screen to create that flexible street. So there would be no curbs on the street. So during days when it's used for traffic, the traffic can still travel along the road. But when you want to have an event, you can then open it up so it's mobile for everyone, and it creates quite a festival atmosphere for the events that the BIA are looking forward to having as we go into the future.
You know, this is a point where I think it would be appropriate, and it'd certainly be a pleasure to compliment staff. When we started this discussion, there was kind of an either-or argument that went on about having a flex street treatment for Lakeshore. And none of us were really thinking about George Street. It was you guys that came up with, well, you can still, and this track to the business community really didn't want a flex street. They didn't want a pedestrian mall on Lakeshore. They wanted traffic. And this allows us to basically have both. And so my compliments as mayor to staff for allowing us to have our cake and eat it too, so to speak. Janet, what is your sense of the attractiveness of the plans that you've seen for the streetscape? Do you think it'll achieve what we were trying to achieve, attract more people?
No, I think that the trees, the flex street's a huge gain. If you think of the vibrancy of downtown, it's when it's an experience, when people want to come down to an event and then they shop. And George Street being a flex street is going to truly provide that additional opportunity beyond what could happen on Centennial Square and what happens elsewhere.
Yeah. Sharlene, will give you at the business improvement area a programming space, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to do many more events of a smaller nature instead of betting everything on the Jazz Festival or Midnight Madness. How have you found what's been the reception to your efforts so far to create more small-scale events? I know we've just finished Autumn Fest. Can you speak to the relative success of that?
Absolutely. I think the community has really enjoyed having these more frequent, smaller opportunities. We do enjoy our large festivals, and we'll continue to do that, but we are trying to introduce these smaller, more frequent elements. And we had a great response from the community on this. People who, came out and maybe didn't know what was happening and stumbled across it were overjoyed. We had several who planned every weekend to make sure that they were there to, be a part of these events that were ongoing. And we received wonderful emails from the community about how they were enjoying these events that were sort of ongoing and smaller. So we really have been appreciating that feedback and appreciating the participation the community has been, providing in these smaller events, because, again, it is a joy to compliment the staff, and I do compliment the BIA staff on the work it does take to do these ongoing events. And so we just really appreciate that people are enjoying them and using them, and they've been going well. So the new programming space, having that flex space, would be a wonderful way for us to extend. We love our town square, and you know, it's a great bonus to the downtown. I think it's one of the things that makes the downtown a great place to be. To have that space grow is exciting to us, and I think we'll be able to use that space well.
So will you get all the way to weekly, or where are you now?
We are almost at weekly. The hope is yes, we can get to weekly. We've been enjoying with introducing late night Thursdays, you know, starting in August, and that ran through to the end of September. Those were weekly events, and then we started with Autumn Harvest, and that was, you know, weekly events. So we're getting there. We have our tree lighting ceremony coming up, and after that we've got weekly events throughout the Christmas period. So we're getting there. We're not quite there yet, but we're very close, and we're excited to be there.
And do you have a sense of how much of an increase in visitor count these events are generating? I would think that it wouldn't have to generate more than a few hundred that weren't there before to add up over the year.
It does. It generates visitors that day. It also generates visitors on other days. Our hope is that these people that are having great times are sharing that with their friends and letting them know we had a great time in downtown Oakville. And that may remind someone to come down on another day and spend some time there, even when there isn't an event happening. So our hope is that it is bringing more people down, and that whether it's 550 or 500, those people are having a great time and visiting those shopkeepers while they're there.
So if the goal is to get more people downtown, and Janet pointed out that there is a perception of parking difficulty, we need perhaps to provide more places for people to park. And that's going to take a lot of time. And in the short term, we've tried to increase people's awareness that there are places to park off of the main street. So there's been more signage. We've been struggling with parking meters that require your license plate and are a challenge to use. I can testify personally that I found it a challenge to use the first time I went to use it. I had to go back to the car and note my license plate number. That's when I discovered that I hadn't memorized my license plate. I have now. But Jane, do you want to explain to us why we need to know our license plate in order to park?
Well, the license plate enables us to be able to track from our parking officers to be able to track those plates, but it also lends us the ability to use on your smartphone with the inputting of your license plate to be able to eventually, and we hope fairly soon, to get to a point where you can then add time to the meter, those types of things. And the license plate is an easy way for the parking officer to ensure that that has happened, and it's the tracking mechanism for the that the meter is correctly paid and it's been done on the smartphone.
So one of the complaints we heard around parking was the difficulty of getting back to add time to the meter, and this is supposed to solve that. But when will we get it? That's the gain, but right now we're only experiencing the pain. How long till we get the gain for this pain?
So as I understand, the parking new process will be up in place by the first of the year. Parts of it will actually be implemented in November 12th, next week actually. And then I expect it'll take us another 6 to 8 months to be able to get the smartphone element up and running.
Now, Sharlene has pointed out a couple times to council that the increase in signage to send people to the side streets to find more parking, as welcome as it is, isn't quite as legible, I guess I'll say, as it could have been. What are we going to do about that?
So I think Sharlene and the BIA has been quite persistent actually in terms of looking at the signage and given us some great examples of where we need to improve the signage. It's the old traditional black and white signs. We need to make it a little bit more user-friendly, and it also simplifies the signage. So we're looking at the lots themselves to be able to do that. But I think the other element that we want to look at is on the street itself. We added signs and we put the signs in with different colors to identify whether you have a 9-hour parking space or a 5-hour parking lot. So it gave people a little bit more direction in terms of where they could go if they were staying a little bit longer. But you add those signs to a street that already is fairly busy with signage, and I'm not sure it sent the right, it gave as much clarity as it could have to the parking. So we are looking at a wayfinding to see how we can not only look at the parking signs, but all the rest of the signage on the street, so it helps people find those things more quickly.
One of the things that the business community wanted, and one of the things that the community organizations like Janet's always want, is to be consulted before we do things. Can we not circulate the designs for signs to the BIA and to the residents associations before we print them?
Certainly we can, and I think we've tried it out throughout, in fact, all the studies we've been doing for the downtown, to an ongoing relationship between the community and the BIA, and certainly that would help it happen.
I think you just heard a promise, and, and I'll try to hold them to it for you. In the couple of minutes that we have left, I want to look at the long-range parking opportunities. We have two drawings. One is of a small new parking structure, and the other is a larger one. And Jane, do you want to talk to the option one? Anthony, maybe you could show the viewers option one. And Jane, what's this about?
So option one is the lot, the surface lot that sits on Church Street, just on the south side of where the former post office site was. It's a lot, it's about 80 spaces that are in there currently as surface lots, and so we looked at the feasibility of building a parking structure on that lot with 3 levels of parking underground and 4 above.
So let's look at option 2 now in the minute that we've got left. That's a bit bigger. What's the plan here?
So this parking garage would be all underground. One concern we heard about lot 2, particularly from the community, was that why are we using very valuable space above ground for parking? So this would use the lot 2 as well as the lot that sits behind the CIBC and the area underneath the streets as well as underneath the post office. So it creates a 2-level parking garage under the streets and under those lot 2 and the post office.
And what would be the total parking count there?
For lot 2, it gives us about, and I had to write the number down, I think it was about 500 spaces.
Okay.
So a significant number of spaces.
So now, the only other piece that we didn't have time to talk about today is the Downtown Cultural Hub, which is a key piece of trying to revivify and make the downtown an even more attractive place to visit. And for the information on the Downtown Cultural Hub, all you have to do is go to oakville.ca on your web browser and enter in the search box Downtown Cultural Hub, and you'll get the hits you need to read those choices. And then we'd like to hear from you about which of the 2 options you're in favor of. This matters to Oakville quite a lot. In fact, this is a decision council hasn't made yet, which of these 2 options, and we want to hear from you. So if Oakville matters to you, please understand that we need to hear from you because you matter to us. And thanks very much for being with us today.